Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Today's interview is about field medical. I'm really excited because we're going to talk about innovative ways to think about field medical, to think about how to engage with quote unquote the customer. And is that even the right term? So if you are in medical affairs, if you are in field medical, you'd care about today's discussion. Our guest today is really interesting. He spent 20 years in pharma, mostly in field medical affairs. He currently leads field medical affairs at Otsuka. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today, Reza, and I'm going to butcher this, but Moghadam. But I'm 90% sure I got a B minus on this last time I pronounced it. So we're going to ask him to redo that. He is a pharmacist. He's an MBA. So I have about 50% in common with him so far. This is the Darshan Talks live stream. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. I'm an attorney. I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. I do have to emphasize I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I'm a pharmacist. My guest is a pharmacist. Neither one of us are your pharmacists, so this is neither legal advice, nor clinical advice, nor business advice, because Reza is an MBA as well. These are considerations, but they don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the guest, or any of their employers or clients. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe, please share. Please feel free to ask our guest questions. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at DarshanTalks, or just go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. You can always find him on LinkedIn, and I'll be flashing that. I'll be flashing that throughout, but he will be on LinkedIn as well. So I'm really excited to have him on. Reza. Hey, Reza, how are you?
Good. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I just want to add too, I'm also not my family's pharmacist either, although they do think that I am at times, but I'm definitely not theirs as well. So, but it's great. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. My family does not ask me questions at all. I've got actual doctors in my family, and I don't get any respect for that. So good for you for at least having that cred in your family. So
yeah, it's dissipating over time, but.
So let's start with some basics, Reza. So the first basic, how do you pronounce your last name appropriately?
I'll give you a B plus, first of all, not a B minus. I'll give you a B plus. And the real way, because it's an Iranian last name, it's Moghadam. But what I've noticed over time is you put in an H in the name, and people don't know what to do with that H, and they get very confused. Because the H, it's in the middle of the name. So most people will say Moghadam, but the real pronunciation is Moghadam. So I give you a B plus for that one.
I will take the B plus. That's a solid B plus. I will take it. So let me ask you this now. The first thing we said when we started talking was this idea of a customer for medical affairs. Now I'm speaking from the role of compliance, and from the role of compliance, the one thing we always talk about is medical affairs does not have customers. Medical affairs is engaged in scientific discussion. We're engaged in making sure that field medical, that medical affairs is talking scientist to scientist. So I think in many ways that's a naive way to think about it, because it assumes that that you can't use lay terminology. What is your perspective when you use the term customer? What are you thinking about? How do you define a customer, and who is the right customer for field medical?
Yeah, I think if we take a step back, I think historically, when you just say customer in the medical affairs or field medical affairs world, it has a negative connotation, right? Because people will think that's customers linked to sales or what have you. But in the grand scheme of life, we're all customers of each other. I'm a customer of you today. I'm a customer of my children at home or my parents, and vice versa. But I think it's an important question, because at the end of the day, what is our purpose within medical affairs or within field medical affairs? We want to ensure that we're interacting with the right customers. And what you mentioned earlier, those scientific discussions are important. I mean, if you look historically over the last 15 or 20 years, or if you go back 15 or 20 years, the people or the customers that we've interacted with have been those national thought leaders. But we've had to, over time, not only as a field medical affairs organization, but as a medical affairs organization, really think about, what does customer mean? Like, what does that term mean? And some will say, well, maybe it's a prescriber. Some will say maybe it's a national thought leader. Some will say customer at the end of the day is the patient. And then the individuals that you're engaging with are stakeholders. So that's something that has been through my mind and my experience over the last 20 years within field medical affairs is when you look back, and as I said before, 15 years ago, we were interacting with your national thought leaders. From a field medical affairs perspective, we want to ensure that we're interacting with those individuals who are influencing others, those individuals who are making decisions, and those individuals who are impacting care. So that customer could be a national thought leader, or it could be someone at the local level, or it could be potentially a patient. There are other, parts of the organization or other pharmaceutical organizations that are interacting with patients. So it's a very, very important question. And I think it becomes equally important over the last 18 months as we've all been working from home or interacting remotely to just reflect on who that true customer is.
So that's an interesting thing you said, right? You talked about this idea that who influences decisions. Now, when you say influences decisions, what does that mean to you? Do you mean affects prescribing habits, or do you mean impacts the health of the patient, or and that's what the decision really matters? Like, how do you define that, and how do you find the right people?
So I think it depends on which function.
Okay.
From a medical affairs perspective, we want to ensure that we're interacting with individuals who are impacting patient care. Now, they may be prescribers or they may not be. It could be, for example, someone who's doing discharge planning at the health system level, at the local. They're making a decision. They're important. They're important for us to communicate so they understand the the clinical and scientific information about our products, or they understand the disease state. So I think it depends on the function. From a medical affairs perspective, for me, it's anyone who is impacting patient care.
So it's anyone who's impacting patient care. So what's interesting about that is and we had a brief discussion about this right before we started. You're casting your net wider. You're not thinking the average prescriber. How do you decide how you're going to allocate resources in a way that you can have the most impact on prescribing decisions in a way that is scientifically sound?
Yeah, that's an important question. When you look at a field medical affairs organization, we're smaller, right? We're smaller than a sales organization, sometimes 10-fold, sometimes 20-fold. And I also think it depends on the therapeutic area. There's some therapeutic areas that you may need more of that scientific exchange. Oncology could be one, orphan diseases could be another. And I think that's where you decide how you deploy some of your resources, and also how deep do you want to get? Do you want to interact with individuals at the local level? Then your resources may need to be greater. And then now the bigger question is the balance between virtual and live interactions. How much do you want to allocate between one or the other? 18 months ago, if we were doing this conversation and I said 5% of our interactions were virtual, you would probably say, really? That's a lot. And now it's completely shifted, but it's now the balance. It's how do we make ourselves more efficient within this virtual world? People crave the face-to-face interactions. They want it. I think we've seen that over the last 18 months, but now we can intertwine the virtual and live interactions to make us more efficient, to maximize our resources, and then to ensure that the customers or the stakeholders that we see really understand our products and can help them make their decisions better for patients. If we focus on the patient at the top, then I think everything else will fall into place.
Which is really interesting to me, because you talked about this this dichotomy between sales functions, which can be 10x, 20x as big as the field medical function, and yet I keep hearing about sales saying that they're losing people, and that medical affairs and medical MSLs, if you will, are gaining the number of people, and companies are saying, can we supercharge sales to be more like medical affairs? What is your thought process about that shift? Do you think it's been going on, people have been talking about it for 30 years, but I feel like it waxes and wanes, and I'd say probably about 4 years ago, it had gained a crest. Do you think we're still in a place where they're talking about the importance of field medical and whether sales should be more like it, or are we back into a sort of a valley where people are saying we want to focus on other things, and we'll come back to this?
I think the prominence and the importance of field medical affairs continues to rise. We're
Yeah.
also seeing other functions being added, such as a patient support or patient education type of function that are also
Yeah.
being added. But I think if it's done right, there's enough work for everyone. Because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that you have all these field functions, right, in the field, and they're all interacting potentially with the same customer or stakeholder. Let's just say the same provider. But if we're not coordinated at the internal level, then we're not meeting the needs of them, and then we're not meeting the needs of patients. But I do think that, especially this day and age, where people's time are limited, access is difficult. And when I say access, I mean access to people. I don't mean market access. I mean access to people is limited from an organizational perspective and not from an FMA perspective. You should upskill your sales reps, but there should be synergy and coordination between all the field functions in order to maximize what the offerings that each company has. It's a very difficult I think question, but I think if you have the leadership and the buy-in, then I think it definitely can work.
And I think that's a really important question, right? Because I think about the fact that it's important to have that coordination, but if you have too much coordination, is medical affairs functioning as sales at that point becomes a question that compliance starts thinking about. And from a legal perspective, you want that Chinese wall, if you will, between the two functions. How do you ensure that you're meeting the needs of customers, as you put it, in a way that is compliant?
Yeah, so I think we're from it's also from an incentive point of view. So
Sure.
Sales reps, they're tied to sales,
Yeah.
exclusively. Now there may be other objectives that you can tie a sales rep to, but field medical affairs is not. We're obviously by objectives,
Yeah.
and we're not tied to sales. I think that's, as long as we're not tied directly to sales, that helps. At the end of the day, we do, within a pharmaceutical company, you are working for a for-profit company. And obviously that becomes a little difficult. But as long as there are some clear rules in place, clear guidance in place, this can work. And that's a challenge that I've also faced, over the last several years. How do you maintain the integrity of a field medical affairs organization, yet, collaborate with other functions, or present your product in the most scientific way? So it's a challenge, but I think it definitely can be done as long as there's guardrails in place and you're providing that support, because not everything is black and white,
Right.
and people have difficulty operating in the gray. But there's certain functions that I believe are for field medical affairs. There are certain functions that are for the patient support group, and certain functions that are for the sales. Obviously, they're there to sell. And if they're not there, then none of us are.
100%. I think sales performs an incredibly important function. Well, now one of the things, and I've interviewed people from Otsuka, whether it's Desiree, whether it's just, you guys have an incredible team leading patient engagement. But what I do want to ask is, as patient engagement becomes more and more important, how do you how does medical affairs see patient engagement? Do you guys see patient engagement as part of your function? And when I say medical affairs, I'm including MSLs and field medical in it. But do you see patient engagement as part of the medical affairs function, MSL function, or do you see them as a separate group that you have to coordinate with? And how do you sort of start drawing those lines?
Yeah, so I think you have to have a separate group. I mean, right now, I think at the end of the day, from a field medical affairs perspective, we will be and have been for a little bit engaging with patients. But there has to be, from a field medical affairs and even a patient support function, there should be a lot of coordination that occurs. Patients right now, every day, they're becoming more educated. You talk about shared decision making. They want to be involved in the decisions for their care with their provider. That's obviously an increasing trend over time. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a lot of the different functions to engage with patients. Do I see it as a primary function of field medical affairs right now? No. We have there's a group here that's their primary responsibility, but I do think that there's a lot of coordination can happen and a lot of collaboration in order to meet the needs of the patient.
So the reason I asked that question is, again, coming from a legal compliance perspective, the basis of medical of sort of the reason medical affairs can engage in many of the tools, many of the off-label discussions that can, is because you're allowed to engage in scientific discussion, and if you do it properly, the FDA has no jurisdiction on it because it's protected under the First Amendment. However, and that's the legal angle of it. The question that's still murky at this moment is this idea that is that same protection available if you're not having a true blue scientific discussion because the person receiving the information is not a scientist, even if you're communicating science-based information. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, in many ways, field medical is ideally placed to communicate that science information, but are they as well placed to break it down in a way that patients understand? And do you find yourself training the people who are engaging with patients in a way that they can explain it? What has been your experience with that?
So I think it depends on the back. If you look at the general background of a field medical affairs or medical affairs organization, they're generally healthcare professionals. So
Right.
The majority of them are pharmacists, PharmDs.
Right.
I would say,
Yeah.
Across the industry, at least half. And there's other healthcare professionals who've come on board. So I do think from a training perspective, they're already equipped to talk to patients. I think the challenge becomes for an organization is, as you're engaging in this dialogue, is it going to come across as you providing clinical advice to this patient? That is, I think, the most challenging question. And can you start to have that dialogue? And then, you never know. Someone comes and says, well, I engaged with this individual and that they provided me with this advice where they perhaps haven't. To me, that's the biggest question. How do you reduce that risk?
So, as part of engaging with patients and building a community, one of the things you are very well known for is what's referred to as PsyQ and nephew. Could you talk a little bit more about what that is, what the impact was, and sort of talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, this is something, and I've been, as you said in my intro, I've been here at Otsuka for a while and been privileged to help start up PsyQ actually 7 years ago. So I've been in the field medical affairs for a very long time, and we've gained over time, we've come to the understanding that you can't just talk about products all the time. You have to provide something where people can understand the disease state and understand the healthcare landscape. So we launched PsyQ 7 years ago as a community to help people understand about depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, but also the healthcare landscape. So 7 years ago, we had a section on digital health and technology where it wasn't as in as it is now. And if you look, we were well ahead of the game 7 years ago, where these remote, if you go to PsyQ.org, you'll see a lot of information, a lot of webinars, also at nephew.org around kidney health. But this is an opportunity for us to give back to the community, but really to provide those stakeholders or customers and even patients and caregivers, because there is a patient and caregiver component to PsyQ, an opportunity to learn about, the mental health or to learn about kidney health as well. So it's been an engagement tool. And I think we've gotten a lot of positive feedback around it over the last 7 years.
So what was the genesis of the idea for that?
It was just when you are in field medical affairs, it's it's a job where you have to engage with people.
Right.
And we have a lot of products, and most companies have products that they go and their MSLs will, talk to a provider and educate them about their products. But there's opportunities where you don't have a lot of new data, or perhaps there's not questions on your products. And this is this was an opportunity for us to do something different and to talk about disease state, just like we're talking right now. I think when you're dialoguing with people, when you're having a conversation with people, or with a psychiatrist or a nephrologist, they want to learn about the disease state. Everyone's very busy, and they want to go to a place where they can access this type of information. And also the other part of it is our field team, our MSL team, our managed market liaison team, even across the organization. They've seen a lot of value in this. They've built this up from the ground up. They do a lot of presentations. And I think it further adds to the credibility of an organization where you can add this type of resource in order to improve or help improve patient care.
Now, when you, and again, I should bring it up when we talk about it. Do you see PsyQ as a community, or do you see PsyQ as a FAQ site? And I use PsyQ with Nephew just as easily. Do you see that as an FAQ site where information can be provided? Or do you see that as a place where information can be engaged with?
So we've been using the term community. And the reason why it's a community is that, we have an online component. You see a library there, you see webinars there, you see other events. But we also have field employees, primarily through field medical affairs, and other parts of the organization are now using it, that are out there doing programs. So you're building a community. Obviously, we still have a ways to go to build the community, but we don't see it as just a site where someone comes and gets information about a particular disease state. We don't actually talk about any of our products on PsyQ or Nephew. It's more about gaining information around the disease state, gaining information around the healthcare landscape, the payer landscape pertaining to mental health, pertaining to kidney health as well. But it's more of a community that we've tried to build over time. It's been a little bit difficult to further build it over the last 18 months, but we've still been able to do a number of different webinars remotely. So the community still continues to be built despite not having that live component over the last 18 months.
So let me ask you this. I mean, I have to first of all say it looks very, very impressive. Just to be clear, this is your site, right? I did not click on the wrong site.
No, yeah, this is, it's obviously part of Otsuka, correct?
Of course, yes. No, but I meant this is very, very impressive. And it talks about all these different issues affecting psych health, if you will. Now, I have a basic question for you as you're starting up. Why did you choose to use a login? Why is it important that a patient create an account on this group? Will they have access to information without it?
So actually, just to clarify, so PsyQ here is primarily for providers or payers, so anyone who is involved in the regulation, financing, or delivery of mental health. However, we do have, to your point, we do have a patient and caregiver section, and that is for patient and caregivers, but that's the only part of PsyQ where a login is not needed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we didn't want patients or caregivers to hesitate to give their contact information. So if you click on the patient and caregiver microsite, if you call
Where am I looking for that?
If you go under go to collections, actually, and it's probably under community corners, but for whatever reason, it's right there. Under disease management and support tools, under patient and caregiver resource center. Yes. But to answer your first part, as far as login and registration is free, but we also do a lot of communication to our community through email newsletters, highlighting events. We do a lot on social media. So that's really why we want simple contact information for the non-patient and caregiver side of PsyQ. But if you're a patient and caregiver, you go directly to psyq.org/patient-caregiver. All the information is there and there's no need to enter in any login information.
So patients don't have to enter anything, and caregivers don't have to enter anything. But if you are a healthcare provider, you may need to log in. Why did you guys think that that was important?
Because that's the way that you build the community. A lot of people, I know we all get a lot of email, but we do a lot of newsletters. We highlight specific content. We do a lot of webinars. We highlight events. We do a lot of local events in communities. So that's an opportunity for us to communicate to the membership and then also gain feedback from them. So because we do polling surveys, we do have an Ask the Expert section here on PsyQ.org. So it's an opportunity, to your earlier point, to build the community.
I love it. I could keep asking like 1,000 questions on just PsyQ and on Nephew. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So thank you for even introducing the concept of it. I do, as you know, I aim for about 15, 20 minutes. We're already well past that at 26 minutes. And we could easily have gone for another several hours. Let me ask you this question. I usually end these conversations by asking about 5 questions. Would you be open to that?
5?
Yes.
Hey, it's your time, whatever you want.
Okay, here's an easy one. Based on what we've discussed, what's something you'd like to ask the audience?
I think that what I like to ask is, where do they see the future of a field medical affairs organization? Whether you're in field medical affairs or not, where do they see it headed? So
let me try to answer that. I usually try to take first crack at it. I think field medical is going to keep evolving. I think the big question that will be a game changer is, what does the FDA decide to do with its opinion on off-label discussions? As you may or may not be aware, the FDA is generally unsure about whether they're going to allow off-label discussions. I had off-label discussions by non-scientific personnel. And that could be a game changer, because I can see the tremendous amount of value that scientists and medical affairs bring to the table. But I can also see smaller organizations going, why don't we combine those two functions and give medical affairs or medical science liaisons sales responsibilities? I think in both scenarios, I think the function grows, but I think that the question is what responsibilities are taken on. And I think that's going to be a very big seismic change going forward. Would you disagree?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's interesting because you see the value of field medical affairs.
Absolutely.
And then giving them sales incentives. Some may call that a super sales rep as well. So how do you maintain the integrity of the various functions that you have within an organization, whether it's field medical affairs or not? I mean, I have a lot of respect for, sales reps. They do a tremendous job in what they do, but that's the question, right? That's the question.
I agree 100%. So here's another question for you. What's the best way for people to reach you?
My LinkedIn. I got to update it though, but my LinkedIn. I've been lazy.
So it's right there.
Yeah.
Here's another question. What's something you've learned in the last month?
It could be anything.
It could be anything you want. I had someone tell me about that an octopus has 3 hearts, I believe.
So I went to a comedy show on Wednesday, and I didn't understand what a reverse ATM was, and I found out what a reverse ATM is. Do you know what a reverse ATM is?
I do not. What is a reverse ATM?
So I guess you're in Philly, right?
I am in Philly.
So I went to the Wells Fargo Center for a comedy show, and they don't take cash. So it said, we only take credit cards and reverse ATMs. I'm like, what is a reverse ATM? Well, this is where you put in cash, and then it gives you a card, so then you can pay for your food or drinks or what have you.
I've never heard of that before.
I've never heard that either.
Huh. That is something new. Okay. What's something that made you happy in the last week?
Something that made me happy in the last week. Just being with family over Thanksgiving. I went to the Philadelphia Union soccer game last night. They won, so that made me happy. So, but the rest of my sports teams lost. So, but just being with family and friends over Thanksgiving, and just just generally, just being grateful for health and everything else.
I think I personally love Thanksgiving. I love hanging out with family, but I know for some people it gives them a lot of heartache. So kudos to you.
Yes.
Here's another question. What's something most people don't know about you? That's the last question, by the way.
What's something that people don't? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm generally I tend to be a private person, but
okay.
But I like to I'd like to do a lot of cleaning around the house. I don't know if that's people may not think that. So, but
I can see that.
Really?
You seem like you're spiffy, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Well, I don't know. I'm not obsessive, but but I don't mind vacuuming here or there, but maintaining cleanliness. But I'm not super, a super like obsessive cleaning person. But
so let's ask you this question.
Yes.
How bad is my background? How much is it bothering you right now?
It doesn't bother me at all, actually. But I can tell you, you can tell a lot by the vacuum that someone owns.
Okay. Well, what can you tell? Because that is probably the best question I've asked all day today.
No, I mean, you have the ones that are into their vacuums and into their Dysons, and then ones that just have perhaps a Hoover.
Fair enough.
What vacuum do you have? Or do you even own a vacuum?
I love being put on the spot with what kind of. I have never been asked the question. I don't know what vacuum I have. I know that I have multiple vacuums. One of them is a Hoover. One of them is a Dyson. Then there's one that's just a commercial grade one, but I don't know what it's called.
You have a lot of vacuums.
I do have a lot of vacuums.
The ones that really own the Dysons are very possessive about their Dysons.
Is that right?
That's what I just noticed.
I love the idea of figuring out someone's personality from their vacuum cleaners. Like that's a whole new level of audience understanding. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
This was a super, super fun conversation. Reza, it was absolutely wonderful having you on. I do hope you'll consider coming back again.
No, definitely. This is great. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully the audience enjoyed it as well. But thank you for the invitation.
Thank you again.